done such an effective job at telling their story. And that has put this pressure on Garland. But as I pointed out in the piece, the gears of justice at the department always move the slowest. And that pace has forced Garland to have to respond, as he did last week, to these outside questions about what is going on and what are they doing. Look, the Justice Department, someone once described to me, was sort of like a tank. It may take a little bit of time for it to move its gaze, but once it hones in on something, it really goes after it. And that's what we may be seeing here, is that a Justice Department that took its time to get to this place is truly digging in and catching up to where the committee and the prosecutors in Georgia are. And the thing about the committee to understand is that they are unbound by many, if not all, of the rules that the department is bound by about what it can talk about publicly, what it can talk about in terms of its investigations, the broad strokes of it, and the type of evidence that they can use. The committee can use any type of evidence that they want. In a courtroom, obviously, those rules are very different. So as the public questions sort of arise and become bigger about what the department is doing, trying to understand the differences between Congress, the Georgia prosecutors, and the department.
Andrew Weissman, Liz Cheney seems so acutely aware of and one step ahead of all of these, but we can't because. I mean, she took on this issue of cross-examination. She said, do you really think that Bill Barr is going to wilt under cross-examination and not call Trump's claims BS? Do you really think that I'm going to get better answers from Pat Cipollone than the Justice Department? Are you kidding? How have they effectively boxed in all those arguments that are the traditional, I don't want to say excuse structure, but the traditional explanations for not moving as quickly as a local prosecutor or congressional committee?
So, I'm hoping that Mike is right, that, what we're hearing from the department, that it's like a tank and, be patient and we're going to get there. And a lot is happening, under the water and you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I hope that is right. I am somewhat pessimistic, although I do think that the January 6th committee has sort of lit a fire under the Department of Justice. And that's why I think you're seeing those statements, those heartfelt statements by the Attorney General. But here's a good example from the way you began, Nicole, with the January 6th committee material that came out today. One of the things I was struck by was not what was crossed out, but something that was in there, which is a statement that said, I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. So if I were the Justice Department right now, I would view that as a cover-up that Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller and the former president of the United States engaged in to make it seem like the president had not engaged in a coup and he actually was against what happened on January 6th. And that was actually part of the planned speech. And that's the kind of thing that what you want to see the department doing is interviewing those people and issuing grand jury subpoenas, and if necessary, putting those people in the grand jury and forcing them to testify and account for their actions. And I think if that happened, we would be quite aware of it. I think that there are enough defense lawyers who would be squawking and revealing to the public and reporters that was going on. So I'm waiting to see that kind of aggressive action by the department.
Andrew Weissman, what you just said is really important, I think, to make sure that we all understand and that our viewers understand. The reason we can say with some confidence that we know that Donald Trump himself and his conduct and Jared Kushner's and Rudy Giuliani's may not be under investigation is because they've been investigated multiple occasions by you and the Mueller probe, by 2 impeachment inquiries, and we know what they look like and sound like under investigation. They have the right to retain counsel, and their counsel has a pattern now under 3.5, I think, if you count the sort of Stormy Daniels stuff as a half probe, because Michael Cohen sort of implicated Trump in what many thought would be the most egregious crimes, campaign finance violations, which brought down the careers of many, but not Trump. We know what they look like. We know what they sound like. We know what they act like under investigation. From your expert eye, do you see any signs that anyone other than Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman, who Mike makes clear that the fake electors probe and some of those other schemes are very much under investigation at this point. But other than that, do you see any indication that anyone close to Trump or Trump are under investigation by DOJ?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. I do think that there's a certain amount that would be secret and we wouldn't know about. But I do think once you start issuing grand jury subpoenas and you start putting relatively senior people in the grand jury, that gets out. And just remember that the recipients of grand jury subpoena do not have to keep that secret. And we're very aware from people like Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman that that's going on, and from others. So I think that we're not seeing any sign that senior people who used to be in the White House under President Trump are being interviewed and being put in the grand jury.
So, Claire, let's keep this forward-looking. Let's keep this productive. The best case scenario is that they weren't, and now they are. Mike's colleagues have also reported that the twice impeached ex-president may be contemplating a second run for the presidency, may announce. Does that make it harder or easier for Merrick Garland to turn up the heat on a probe of Donald Trump?
I'm not sure it ever gets any harder. I think indicting a former president on crimes surrounding a political election is as tough as it gets. But Andrew, as always, is being certain and very articulate about DOJ. Let me put it more plainly. For some reason, in a way that the federal government usually doesn't operate, they've allowed other investigations to get way ahead of them. And that was a choice they made. They allowed a House committee to get first shot at these witnesses, to get them in a deposition before the federal government had them down to a statement. And if they were getting statements from them, we would know about it because they'd all be lawyered up. So what were they thinking? Did they think just by going after the mob, that would be enough until Liz Cheney and that committee basically threw open the curtains and said, DOJ, hello? So I am very pessimistic that DOJ is, because this is not the way they usually operate. They want to be first on the block, not last on the block. I know, because I've been pushed down the line by them many times in investigations where I was not allowed to get evidence and witnesses because they claim dibs. So it is very unusual for them to be last to the party. And I think the decision is always a tough one, but he took the job knowing that this was looming. He knew that when he took the job. And I hope I'm wrong, but I'm worried that a terrible precedent is going to be set by this particular attorney general.
I want to read some new reporting that NBC has to you, Mike, because it sort of bears out Claire's point. Mark